On this week's episode of the podcast, Schedule I and J in bankruptcy.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, and as always, the podcast is brought to you by my firm, Yesner Law. And I know it's been a while since I've touched on some bankruptcy topics, and so I thought I'd bring you all a bankruptcy topic today. So what I thought I'd talk about are Schedules I and J as part of the bankruptcy petition, because there is an art, there is a science to completing someone's budget when they've decided to file for bankruptcy. And so that's what I would talk about. So from a basic perspective, Schedule I is the budget, Schedule I describes income, and Schedule J is expenses. So a couple of things that we need to look at when we're looking at Schedules I and J. And by the way, for anybody who wants to see a copy of a blank Schedule I and J, please shoot me an email, Sean, SHAWN, at YesnerLaw, YESNERlaw.com. And actually, as I record this, I'm also on Facebook Live. So if you're listening on Facebook Live and you want to see a copy of I and J, shoot me an email or make a note here on Facebook Live, and as soon as I get done recording, I will ship it over to you. But the first thing that we need to do here with Schedule I, we need to tell the bankruptcy court, are we single or are we married? And then does our spouse live with us? So there is an option to say that we're married, but we're separated, and so we're going to disclose our income to the trustee, but we're not going to disclose our spouse's income because we don't know what it is, because we're separated, because the spouse doesn't support us other than through alimony or child support, which I'll get into here in a minute. But there is that option within Schedule I to correctly claim marital status as married, but then delete the spouse's income because the spouse doesn't live with you, or you're separated, or for some other reason. Obviously, this is a budget. We're talking about income. So the very first thing that the trustee wants to know, the very first thing that Schedule I wants to know is, what is your occupation? And are you employed? What is your employer's name and address? And how long have you been employed? And this would apply whether you have one job or two jobs or three jobs, regardless of the number of jobs. We have to list them here. The next thing we go to is wages. Now, this can get a little complicated. Now, luckily, I happen to be looking at the screen of my bankruptcy program, and my bankruptcy program calculates everything for me pretty good, but I still have to calculate this stuff for myself. So, for example, are you paid monthly? Are you paid twice a month on the 1st and 15th, or on the 15th and the 30th, or 31st, or the 15th, or the end of the month? Or are you paid every other week? And there's a difference there, because if you're paid every other week, 2 months out of the year, there are going to be 3 payrolls. There are going to be 26 payrolls in a year. So what we need to do when we're describing income, if you're paid every other week, we need to take that per payroll number and multiply it by 26 payrolls, and then divide that by 12 to get the monthly number. So a lot of times, people will give me their payroll, the amount of money they make from their paycheck, and the bankruptcy program knocks it up a little bit, and they get concerned because they don't make that much on a monthly basis. And while that's true, 2 months out of the year, they get an extra paycheck. And so that's why we have to be careful of how often are you paid. The first thing that the Schedule I wants to know is your gross wages, any estimated overtime, and then all your payroll deductions. This is for people that earn a W-2 salary. If you pay yourself, if you're self-employed, there's another place where we show that. If you get Social Security income, if you get disability income, if you get pension income, there's a different place in Schedule I that we show that. This first part of Schedule I, this first part of the income on a bankruptcy petition, is for people that make a W-2 salary. And it can be a consistent, I make X amount of dollars every 2 weeks, or it can be somebody who's paid hourly who gets overtime. We have to calculate how much money does the person make. Then there's a spot for other income. So we can talk about income from the operation of a business. We can talk about net income from rental income. We can talk about or disclose interest and dividend income. We can disclose support payments, alimony, child support. We can disclose unemployment compensation. We can disclose Social Security. We can disclose other governmental assistance, pension and retirement income, or other monthly income. Other monthly income, I think, is sort of a catch-all where we need to disclose anything and everything else. Are you getting money from mom and dad on the side to help float your bills? Typically is where is going to go in other income. Are you, for example, maybe babysitting on the side, and so you're getting money from babysitting, or you're selling stuff on the internet, and so we would put the sales possibly would go there, another monthly income. Or if you do internet sales as your business, it would go up here where we're talking about money from the operation of a business. If you're self-employed, we're going to talk about income from the operation of a business in that area. Then there's a place where we can tell the trustee that we expect an increase or a decrease, if that's true, in our budget. So we anticipate we're going to get a raise on such and such a date, or we anticipate we're going to get annual raises, or we anticipate we might be laid off if we're maybe filing a Chapter 7 case, or whatever. Is there anything that we need to disclose to the trustee to show that the income numbers will increase or decrease over the life of this plan? Then that's about it. That's about it for Schedule I. Now, I said there was a lot of art and science to completing the budget, and that's true. But I think the art and the science comes in the expenses. And so these are all the assets. These are all the income that we went over. So do you earn a W-2 wage, or do you get income from the operation of a business? Do you get rental income? Do you get interest income, dividend income, alimony, child support, unemployment, Social Security, other government assistance? I've put food stamps in here. So someone who gets food stamps. Now, there is a corresponding expense that I'll get to in a minute, but if you get food stamps, I put that in other government assistance. Are you getting pension or retirement income? Are you getting other monthly income, for example, from family or friends? So that's all for Schedule I for the budgetary portion of the bankruptcy petition. I want to flip my attention now and go to Schedule J, which are the expenses. And so this is where some of the art of being a bankruptcy attorney comes in. The first thing that the bankruptcy court wants to know is, what dependents do you have? So do you have kids who are dependents, or do you have a dependent parent or a dependent sibling or somebody that you are the guardian for? But typically it's going to be kids. Your dependents are going to be your kids. And so there's a place here in Schedule J, where we list all of the dependents. Then we have to disclose within the bankruptcy petition, what is the rental income that you pay, or what is the mortgage payment that you pay? Do you pay taxes, insurance, home maintenance, and homeowner association or condominium dues? And if you pay those, are those part of your mortgage payment? So if somebody had a $1,000 mortgage payment, but they had a $250 escrow, so their total mortgage payment was $1,250, the correct way to disclose it would be $1,000 as your mortgage payment, and then you pay $150 a month in taxes and $100 a month in homeowner's insurance, and then that would accurately calculate your mortgage expense. And then do you pay homeowner association or condominium dues? Now, one interesting thing about Schedule J, the expenses, in a Chapter 13 case where we are going to do something to the mortgage payment within the bankruptcy plan, so we're going to make our mortgage payment through the bankruptcy trustee plan, we don't actually list a mortgage expense in the budget, because that money that would typically go to the mortgage expense is now going to go to the bankruptcy trustee to pay the mortgage expense. So by listing it as a mortgage expense, we're actually potentially paying it twice. So that's something that we have to look at when we're completing the mortgage payment. But again, if you rent, then your rental payment is going to be the first thing that goes here on Schedule J. Then we look at additional mortgage payments. So do you have a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, something like that, where we have to put a second mortgage payment, something in that field. Then we have to describe your utilities. So what's your electricity, your heat, your gas, your water, your sewer, your garbage collection, your telephone bill, your cell phone bill, your internet bill, satellite bill, cable bill, or any other utilities? Now, here's one thing that may come up. I mean, for example, in the summertime here in Florida, your utility bill, your electric bill is going to be double or triple what it is in the wintertime, especially if you're like me and you like to open the windows when it gets cool outside. Then you're not going to use your heat, you're not going to use your electricity those times that you have the windows open. So your electricity bills could range from less than $100 or $100 in the winter to more than $200, $220, $250 in the summer. And so one thing that I would typically do is try to average out all of those utility bills over the course of the year and put in the average utility bill. We don't want to go too low because we don't want to show the trustee that you have a ton of extra income. At the same time, I don't think it's fair to say every month we're going to pay $250 in electricity when we know that in the wintertime our electric bills are going to go down. Same thing with water usage, sewer usage, gas usage, and a lot of times sewer garbage collection. At least I know where I am here, I believe garbage collection is included in our tax bill, so it wouldn't be something that we would include in the expense part of the budget if we've already included it as a tax escrow. If, like in your neighborhood, garbage collection is included on your tax bill. Telephone, cell phone, internet, satellite, cable, all of that gets included. Now, sometimes I think the budget here may be wrong in that my cell phone bill and my internet bill are two separate things. I happen to use two different providers, one for internet and one for cell phone. So in that situation, what I would probably do is list the internet bill where it's listed, and then there's this catch-all other utilities where I would then put the cell phone bill. But again, as long as we're disclosing everything to the IRS, I think we're doing okay. Food and housekeeping supplies. Now, this one's a little strange. I think that the trustees sort of generalize and say each person in the house is going to eat between $200 and $250 per person per month. So with a household of four, if I put a lot more than $1,000 a month or a lot less than $1,000 a month, this budgetary item may draw a raised eyebrow from the bankruptcy trustee. So we need to be careful. But I think what the trustees here in Tampa do is they estimate that around $200 to $250 per person per month. Again, if you have two boy teenagers, maybe that bill is higher. One example here is I had a client, a single man, who said, I pay about $1,500 a month in food. And I looked at him, and he wasn't overweight. He was, I guess, a good-looking guy. I don't necessarily judge that kind of thing, but he wasn't really overweight. And I said to him, "You're not packing on the pounds. Where are you putting $1,500 a month in food?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I date a lot." And I said, "Well, that's great. I mean, I'm happy you have a good social life, but I don't think the trustee is going to allow us to get away with $1,500 a month in food in your dating life." And that was somewhere where I was able to get him to cut food expenses, which helped his budget. The next line item on the budget is childcare and children's education costs. And again, this is one that can get a little bit squirrely because what do you pay for your childcare costs? What do you pay for your children's education costs? If you've got a 15-year-old in public school, your education costs are going to be a lot less than if you have a 2-year-old in daycare. And at the same time, if you've got a 15-year-old in the most expensive, prestigious private school in the area, the trustee may challenge that fee because your child may not need to go to that school to get a good education while you're trying to file bankruptcy. So that is another area that we need to be a little bit careful in terms of the type of expense or the type of deduction that we talk about. Another area, the next expense item on the budget is clothing, laundry, and dry cleaning. And again, be careful here. I mean, I just spent $80 on dry cleaning, and I probably do dry cleaning once every month or every other month. I'm in a suit today because I was in court today, but I very rarely wear suits, so I don't have a lot that needs to be dry cleaned. I don't go to court that often. And so you want to be careful about, if you have a washer dryer in your house, then really all you're doing is dry cleaning. If you do not, if you rent and you have to go to the laundromat or you have to go to a coin-operated facility, then obviously we're going to expect there to be some expense here. If you work in a job where you have a uniform that you have to wear that needs to be dry cleaned, again, maybe that's a place where we can get away with a little bit more as this budgetary item. But if you're, you put on slacks and a shirt and you go to work and you can throw that in the washing machine when you get home, trying to put a lot of expense in this clothing, laundry, and dry cleaning expense category is probably going to be challenged by the bankruptcy trustee. Personal care products and services. I think the same thing. Those of you that are looking at me on Facebook Live, I don't really spend a lot to manage the top. I probably spend a little bit more to manage the beard. But again, what types of personal care products and services? If you are someone who is bald and you have, $500 a month in hair care products, the trustee is going to challenge that. So, what kind of personal care products and services? If you're a woman, you need feminine products more than a man would. So maybe there's more of an expense if you're a single woman who's filing, or maybe there's more of an expense if you're a woman and you're filing jointly with your spouse. Maybe there's something more there. The next group of category, medical and dental expenses. So what type of prescriptions? How often do you go to the doctor? What kind of copays do you need to pay? All of that stuff needs to be lumped into medical and dental expenses. Transportation. Now, we need to include gas and maintenance, but not your car payment. So in times when gas prices are higher, this expense can be more. In times when gas prices drop, this expense should be less. And then what we probably need to do is annualize your maintenance expenses and then divide that by 12 to put that here as your transportation expense. The other thing here that the trustee might look at is how old is your car? If you have a brand new car, we would expect your transportation expenses to basically be gas. If you have a 10-year-old car, we're going to expect there to be a little bit more maintenance there. So that maybe that expense can be a little bit higher. The next one's kind of interesting. Entertainment, clubs, recreation, newspapers, magazines, and books. So the trustee in the bankruptcy court and the bankruptcy code do give you some leeway to have a little bit of fun. But again, we're not talking trips out of town. We're not talking trips to Vegas here in the Tampa Bay area. We're not talking trips to the Hard Rock. We're talking about, do you go to the movies once a month? Do you go out to dinner every once in a while? Do you subscribe to any magazines that, I don't even know, because now most everything is online anyway. But what are some of the types of things that the trustee and the bankruptcy court and the bankruptcy code will allow you to put something in here in the expense category for recreation? Do you make any charitable contributions and religious donations? That's the next expense category. You can. There's a long-standing old case law that I learned about in law school that the bankruptcy court cannot prohibit you from making charitable contributions. You can still tithe if you tithe. However, if you tithe and you want to claim it on your bankruptcy schedules, it would be helpful to get receipts so that we can show the court how much you tithe. So that one is an interesting category. Then we talk about all the insurance that is not deducted from wages. So do you have a life insurance policy? Do you have a health insurance policy? Do you have a car insurance policy? What other types of insurance policies do you have that you pay on a monthly basis? And again, the trustee may challenge some of these numbers if, for example, you're buying $1 million policy. The trustee is going to challenge why you need that policy if you're going to be filing bankruptcy. But for the most part, as long as these insurance policies are reasonable in amount. The next expense category is taxes that are not deducted from wages. So do you owe the IRS or do you owe some other kind of tax? That expense category goes here. The next expense category is car payments and lease payments, installment payments. Now, this is another place where the trustee can challenge because we need to be careful. Obviously, if we're claiming bankruptcy, but we're paying thousands of dollars a month for our cars, the trustee may challenge that. Interestingly, as a bankruptcy attorney, I'm not allowed to tell a client to incur debt in order to file a bankruptcy. So if I see that their car payments are too high, I might be able to suggest that they get a different car and a cheaper car payment so that their car payments are not challenged, but I'm not allowed to tell my clients to incur debt in anticipation of filing a bankruptcy. The next expense category is if you pay alimony or child support or something like that. Now remember, in the income part of the budget, there's a place to say that I receive this kind of money. And then in the expense portion of the budget, there's a place to say I pay this kind of money. Then the next expense category is payments you make to support others who do not live with you. So again, this is the reverse of what we saw in the income. In the income, I can list that I get payments from mom and dad if that's what I need to supplement my monthly income. In the expense budget, if you are mom and dad and paying this money to your child is forcing you into bankruptcy, this is where that payment goes. But I think a payment in this expense category is certainly going to be challenged by the bankruptcy trustee unless your child has some type of emotional or physical support that they require. If you're just helping to subsidize your kid because they're in college and they don't want to work, I think the trustee might challenge that. The next group of expense categories deal with other property that you own. So do you have an investment house that requires the payment of a mortgage payment, taxes, insurance, repairs, homeowners associations? Again, I think if you have investment property and you try to file bankruptcy, the trustee is going to challenge you on that number. The last one is just a catch-all other expenses. And so here's what I need to do when I look at, and then I apologize, just like on the income side, on the expense side, there's a place to explain to the trustee that you foresee that your income is going to go up or down, or I'm sorry, your expenses are going to go up or down during the course of the bankruptcy proceeding, which will cause your income, your net income ultimately, to go up or down during the bankruptcy proceeding. Now, when I say there's an art to completing this form, what I mean is some of the stuff that I said. We can't put $1,500 of food if you're a single person. We can't put $1,000 Porsche payment if you're trying to file bankruptcy and you make $20,000 a year. Those types of things are all things that we need to look at. We need to look at how much on average is your utility bill, how much on average are some of the bills that may fluctuate, gas, water. What are the bills that don't fluctuate? Cable, internet, cell phone. Or maybe cell phone does fluctuate because you're not on a payment plan, and so your cell phone payments can fluctuate based on the amount of data that you use. All of these are issues that we need to take into account. Now, the last question I think everyone's going to have here is, well, fine, do I need to show a positive income or a negative income? And I don't like that question because the answer to that question assumes that you're making up numbers to make the bankruptcy look better. So typically what I'll do is I'll ask a client to fill it out honestly, and then we'll go through it. If I see that they've got an expense category that's too high, we'll talk about it. And if we need to lower it or raise it, we will. If I see an income number that seems to be out of whack, we'll talk about why are you claiming all of that overtime when your pay stubs show you get very little overtime? Or why are you claiming no overtime when your pay stubs show you get a ton of overtime? So those are all the different factors that we'll talk about. The budget does schedule I and J of the bankruptcy petition. The budget does come into play when we have to file Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 cases from the perspective of, do we make a small enough amount of income that we qualify for Chapter 7, or do we have additional excess income that we may need to pay to the trustee in a Chapter 13 case? So that's an explanation of Schedule I and J. I think Schedule I and J are a really good tool if you just want to budget. Forget filing bankruptcy. If you just want to budget and try to see where does my money go, the only thing that's missing from Schedule J is credit card payments. If you're not filing bankruptcy, you may need a place to pay medical payments, credit card payments, hospital payments, all those kinds of things. If you want a copy of a blank Schedule I and J so that you can sort of budget where's your income coming in and where's your money going, again, please shoot me an email, sean@yesnerlaw.com. Let me know that you want a copy of the Schedule I and J, or let me know you want a copy of the budget. And I'll zip you a blank one that you can, fill out here in pen or pencil to figure out what your budget is. So that is all for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this explanation of the Schedule I and J as a budget tool within the bankruptcy court, within the bankruptcy petition. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Please check us out on social media. Those of you listening and watching on Facebook Live, Thank you. I appreciate your support. But I think that is all for this week's episode, and we will catch you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.